Hey everybody, tutorial number 3 in this series on grids, and here we're going to take a look at a sort of map, topographical looking sort of map making algorithm that uses this grid structure that we've built. So I've added these 9 images from a great game called Tsuro that I play with my kids. And I'm going to, rather than assigning colors, I'm going to assign these map pieces to the squares. So actually I could change the name of this. It's no longer a color square, it's just a square. And instead of changing the color, disable my color changers here, I am going to use a new behavior called, I forget what it's called, choose image, select image, change image. It's called change image. Yes, change image, that's what it is. And you can use a change image to set to any stored image. So if I just use this, my map is all set to that image. But what makes it more interesting is if we, again, randomize it. So I'm going to need to create a new attribute, an integer, and I'm going to call it which piece. And since I have 9 pieces, I'm going to choose a random number between 1 and 9. And then I'm going to create a rule to say if which piece equals 1, then change image to Tsuro 1. I'll call this 1. And then, just to see it working, I'm going to duplicate this and make a 2 to 9 rule and say if which piece is greater than 1, do Tsuro 2. And let's see what happens. Yeah, I get some of one pattern and some of the other pattern. And of course I get a lot more of this pattern than I do this pattern, because this pattern only appears when my random number comes up as 1, whereas this pattern comes up if my random number is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. But I can now step through and use my equals feature copy and paste. There it goes. For 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, and in most programming languages this would be much quicker, much less complicated, but this is the easiest way to do it in GameSalad, because GameSalad is designed for simpler applications. 5, 6, I suppose I didn't have to do all 9 pieces, but you can get up and get yourself a refreshing beverage while I do 7, 8, and 9. Almost done. And number 9. Good thing I didn't have 100. put them all in there. 11, 8, and number 9. And I should have 9 different images. Let's make our grid a little bigger so we can really see the benefit of this. Make it 8 by 4. Nice. And each time I refresh, I get a different randomized string map pattern. And what's interesting is each of these puzzle pieces can be rotated. You see that the connection points are in the same place on each piece. So you can rotate these 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or 270 degrees to create even more patterns. That's really cool. So I can create a new attribute I'll call it rotation, and I can change that attribute it's not showing up. Try it again. Change attribute. Which attribute? There it is, rotation. And I'll randomize this 0 through 3. So my rotation is going to be 0, 1, 2, or 3. Now why did I do 0 through 3 instead of 1 through 4? Because I want to change attribute rotation to rotation, that's the random number I just generated, times 90. Why? Because I want, if this generates a 0, I want it to be going 0 degrees facing to the right. If it generates a 1, 90 degrees facing up. If it generates a 2, 90 times 2 is 180 facing to the left. If it generates a 3, 3 times 90 is 270 facing down. Now before I do this, I'm going to tell you this won't work. But I just wanted to show you the thought process. And now for the ugliness. That's terrible. Why is that so terrible? Why do I hate this? Because they're rectangles. They're not squares. They're rectangles that have been computed based on the number of rows and the number of columns we have. And when you rotate a rectangle, it's not going to fit together with the other pieces neatly. Oh no. What am I going to do? Well, simple solution. I don't actually need to rotate these. I can flip them horizontal and flip them vertical and get exactly the same effect. So that was a bad idea. Gone. But I can leave this. I'll still call it rotation even though we're technically not rotating. And I can say, alright, if my random number is 0, do nothing. If it's 1, flip horizontally. If it's 2, flip vertically. And if it's 3, flip both horizontally and vertically. That will give me the same result, but it won't change the rectangular shape of the... It would not change the rectangular shape, but it won't rotate a rectangular object. It'll just be mirroring it. So, and did you notice that word if in there? Because I said if, I know I need a rule. What's my rule going to be? It's going to be an attribute rule. It's going to be if self-rotation equals 1, then change attribute. Which attribute? Our good old friend. Graphics, flip horizontally. Set it to 1. But wait, didn't we say we wanted to flip it both vertically and horizontally if my random number generated a 3? Well, I could add that as another condition and say aha, if attribute rotation equals 3. So if it's a 1 or if it's a 3, it's going to flip it horizontally. But wait, this says when all conditions are valid. So I'm saying if self.rotation equals 1 and simultaneously self.rotation equals 3, never going to happen. It can't be two numbers at the same time. When any conditions are valid, which means either if self-rotation equals 1 or if self-rotation equals 3, then flip it horizontally. Terrific. That should give me some variation. And we can test it at this point. And it's hard to see, but there's more variation in the patterns than there were before. Some of these are flipped horizontally. Actually, if we want to see which ones are flipped horizontally, it's easy to do. We can do another change attribute here, and take the red out of any ones that are flipped horizontally. Those are the ones that are flipped horizontally. Fabulous. With this one, it doesn't matter. With that one, it doesn't matter. But this one would have been different. Similarly, that one would have been different. Flipped horizontally. So let's take a look at flipping vertically. Very similar. If the attribute, so what are we doing? We said we're going to flip it. All right, this one was flip horizontally. We flipped horizontally if it's 1 or 3. So for this one, we want to flip it vertically if it's 2 or 3. Well, that's easy because we can say greater than 1. Because the possible values are 0, 1, 2, and 3. So we say if the rotation is greater than 1, in other words, if it's 2 or 3, then we want to change attribute graphics flip vertically to 1. And just to stay with our idea of changing colors, we'll also do a change attribute that takes the green out of the ones that are flipped vertically. Which means we have white ones that are unflipped, blue ones that are flipped horizontally, purple ones that are flipped vertically, and blue ones that are flipped both horizontally and vertically. And of course the colors were just there for us to help us see what was happening, so we can turn those colors off and get our randomized image grid. And I guess this is going to be 4 tutorials. So there we go. We have a week off from class, but we got a lot of tutorials. So in our final one, I'm going to do how to make the maze, which is actually pretty simple.